Hello and welcome to this session today where we're going to talk about upgrading Pims and Upframe and the different strategies one can choose from that, because it's quite important when upgrading to choose the right way of doing it. Of course, it can be quite a complex affair to upgrade a Pims, and which way you want to go will depend on different things. And one of the approaches that has become more and more popular lately in the Upframe environment and Pims environment is to go in with a new fresh Pims with the latest and greatest Upframe, and then just pull over all the data from the existing solution. And if you had some customization, which we just talked about in our previous session, but if you had some customization, you basically have to re-customize what you had before. That how you get those customizations over to that new solution might also vary, but you might use some scripting, or you might do just recode everything once more. Yeah. One of the reasons why this model is becoming more attractive now, I think, is because our clients really typically want to have the latest product version. 5, 10, 15 years ago, typically all the customized stuff that one had done for a client might make their solution so different that it was really hard for them to accept that they were going to use a new product version which they didn't have a relation to. The other variant that we're going to talk about in this session is doing the traditional approach, or a new variant of the traditional approach, using this RF upgrader. And we'll talk about that. But first of all, we'll start with Simon, who will talk about this option by putting in a new Pims and pulling all the data over, and how he has developed that feature basically, and how it's been used in some upgrades already. Okay, over to you, Simon.
Yes, thank you, Johnny. So yeah, it's like you mentioned, I'll be going over the data transfer part of upgrading. I first just want to talk a bit about how this works, specifically the upgrading part, because I think what's been missing for a long time for data transfer upgrades is some general tooling that is I'd say generalizable and possible to extend out to all modules and work in a good way for clients on all versions, basically. So clients upgrading from 2010 or clients upgrading from last year, it's sort of important to have some general tooling that accommodates everyone, and that we can do with the method we've gone with here, which is just some generalized scripts. So nothing tightly integrated with AppFrame itself. It's basically just a few scripts that you can run to assist the data transfer. So why I want to just step through the scripts and tools here first is that previously I think upgraders have reinvented the wheel basically like 5, 10, 20 times, and it's quite important to have something that can be worked on over time and developed further to have something good for people doing the upgrades. So the step-by-step process is pretty simple. You start off by setting up the latest release from stage on your client server. You can obviously do all this elsewhere on a different server if performance is an issue. The second step is to prep the new database. Basically a 5-minute checklist, disable check constraints, foreign keys, triggers, and create a simple log table script. And info on all this stuff will be available on a team doc, newly set up team doc that we have. Might also distribute this information elsewhere if people want that. So when you've prepped this new database, you've gotten to the stage where you want to move data to it in a test run. And to do that, we'll be using what is showing on screen here. This is what it achieves, the script, it's a pretty long thing, but what it does is just select a bunch of insert statements for you, where you insert from one database to the other database. And the reason for it being quite lengthy is that we want to make sure that the insert statements we create are as robust as they can be to changes in the database schemas that has happened between the from database you're inserting from to the new latest release from dev. So that's why it's quite lengthy. And also there are some settings here. Some are quite nice to have, like dynamic where clause you can use for all the insert statements. So you can include the most common use case would be having a where clause on domain. So if you have some trash domains or some testing domains you don't want to include in the production version, you can exclude those very easily. And also, of course, you typically want to move data for a specific set of modules or namespaces. So for that purpose, it's also very easy to filter down for exactly what tables you want to move data for. For this script in particular, there's a lot of documentation here and a pretty thorough description also on that theme doc that will be uploaded quite soon. So please go in there to check it out if you're interested in using this. The next step after you have ran your insert statements.
Just a question before you get to that point, Tim, but how do you deal with all the existing foreign key constraints, triggers, default, all kinds of constraints here and there?
That's an excellent question, and that's the next step in the process.
Okay.
So before you run these insert statements, what you do is the kind of idiot thing. You just disable absolutely everything so that you can have a fun time when inserting. And then during the next step, the reason for this is not just that developers are lazy, but the reason why is that in the next step we have a script here to re-enable all constraints, and you can do that in bulk when you have all the data already moved over, because then you can look at all the conflicting foreign keys and constraints in batch and write out select scripts, etc., so that you can look at all the data that have conflicts in bulk with one press of a button, basically. And you can also print out delete statements and everything so that you can have a very ad hoc way of dealing with and stepping through all the scripts that you are working on. So this script handles exactly that. What it does is that it has two modes. The first mode is that it enables every constraint on the database in bulk. What it does is it enables every constraint with conflicts using with check in SQL Server. That means that we verify data that is inserted, updated, and deleted after the point of enabling, but we don't verify the data that we have input through the insert script. So we do that for all the constraints with conflicts, and then we enable with check for all the other ones without conflicts, so that we have all constraints without conflicts properly enabled for the future. And then what you're left with is a bunch of constraints with conflicts after an upgrade like this. So anywhere between typically 20 to like 200 constraints will have conflicts. That's like a common range. It can vary quite widely depending on how many modules you're upgrading and so on. So the output of the script when you are using it with the other setting is that it prints out a bunch of info about each and every constraint that has conflicts. So I have a little picture of a real printing out of this, running of this script that we ran on Saturday when we went live with an upgrade using this method. This is from that upgrade. And so this prints out, we have 4 check constraints with conflicts, and we had about, not showing the full list here, but I think we had about, let me make it a bit bigger actually. Hopefully you can see it okay, not super high res, but we had about 50 to 60 foreign keys with conflicts. And this is a super typical case. You can see, looking at the lookup tables to the right here, We have a lot of commonalities between them, a lot of system user popping up. Again, this was from the real upgrade we did this weekend. The reason for system user popping up was that we had forgotten to move over users before doing this part. And so we did users afterwards, and we knew we didn't have to deal with all these foreign key conflicts in advance. We just saw that system users was not populated properly, and then we added all the users in one go, and that got rid of all these conflicts. And same thing you will see with, this is the typical case. You'll have, I'd say, somewhere in the neighborhood of 10, 15 real conflicts, which are based on some ad hoc changes to the individual modules you're working with. And then you'll have 80 to 90% of the rest of the conflicts are one thing that you've forgotten. And this provides a sort of a check after doing the insert statements that you have remembered everything that you need to remember also. So this is the process for re-enabling all the constraints again. And when you've done that and created the users, we also have a short script for creating users. A note on users is that it will vary a huge amount how you need to create users for an upgrade. Some cases you need to change login often also with a data transfer upgrade, because there are typically longer upgrades with a longer from the database you're moving from was created a long time ago. And in those cases, you might want to do something ad hoc. We have a very basic user creation script. And so now you're at the testing and customization implementation part. And this step is also one of the key things that really help and is a positive for the data transfer method, I'd say. And the reason for that is that while you're going through testing, fixing things and re-implementing customizations that you might have, for the go live, you don't actually need to rerun all the customizations you've re-implemented in your first test run. You don't need to rerun all the scripts. The only thing you need to do is delete the testing data and then reinsert the prod data for the go live downtime period. And the deleting of the testing data you can also do before the go live downtime period. So the only real thing you need to do and have downtime for is reinsert data with this script that you now have prepped and tested and finalized, and then do testing. And what we saw last weekend and what we've seen with other upgrades is that you can cut down on the amount of downtime need for a go live process quite significantly. At least this upgrade that we did last weekend, which was quite an interesting upgrade on paper. We had two databases from different versions, one from over 2 years ago that we had to consolidate, different modules, some interesting domains existing in both databases, etc. Despite all that stuff, we could have gone live without really any issues with this method over an evening of downtime.
That's cool.
And so that's generally the go live process there. Some other key things to note about the data transfer approach is you will upgrade all modules. You won't have any options for changing that. By default, you upgrade all modules. And so if you want to avoid upgrading 1 or 2 modules, you need to then do ad hoc stuff to re-implement the old versions, for example. And so that should be a key driver in deciding if you want to use the data transfer versus the change pack method. Also, how far back you're upgrading from impacts what method to choose quite significantly, and how many modules the client is using already is quite impactful. So that's the key points. There's one last thing I want to mention, and that is this data transfer approach quite significantly benefits from the way I've written it in my notes is benefits from the suffering of others, which is a nice way of putting it. You really truly do or have the potential at least to benefit from other people having gone through an upgrade, and that is through using manual scripts to deal with all the conflicts that arises from a generalized process like this. One of the key things that pops up here is that, for example, when a primary key is rebuilt completely on the same table that exists in both databases, there is no way for us to handle that in a generalized way. Another example is a new field being added that is critical to the function of the system. We haven't got any generalized approach to fix that, so we need to rely on the product group's implementation guides through the change packages and the updaters, where they always have manual scripts for each of these changes. So you can fetch those manual scripts and include it into this data transfer script here, which we've done now for document control. And with the latest changes we've found, I think you can run an upgrade for document control in a fraction of the time that you could before, when you have the manual scripts enabled. And this is also something that, if people are aware of this for future upgrades, they need to fetch those manual scripts anyway, and need to get them from change packages or write them themselves to do an update. Including them then after that into this script is a very quick job. And so the general approach, I think, scales much better to shortening the upgrade time quite significantly.
And you have this approach has now been used on like several upgrades, right? Do you know
Yes.
roughly how many?
7, I think now.
Okay.
This iteration of the script, roughly 3 or 4, but it's changed a bit in the last 3 or 4 upgrades.
Yeah, so some improvements for every upgrade, basically, to make it smoother every upgrade. But still, this method is perfect when you have a database which is some months old, right? If you have a database which is updated on a monthly basis, then you will use the AF upgrader approach. Is that correct?
Correct. So I would say that there is of course a sweet spot in between when to do the data transfer approach and this approach, and that lies probably somewhere between half a year to a year back in time, where this approach is probably a better one. But the use cases, that's also a very important point. The different upgrade paths is so entirely dependent on the use case, and they can vary a lot. So I think it's hugely important for anyone considering what path to choose is to ask someone who's used the different approaches and take a 30-minute, half-hour session in advance of deciding what to go for, instead of banging your head against the wall for 100 hours extra than what you really needed.
That sounds really smart, and you are one of the persons that they might want to contact and to get some experience from you, and of course others that have done it as well. So the more experience we get with using this new method, the more people will know how it's working out. That's very good, and there are many clients that perhaps upgrade their Pims only once a year. So this is highly very a method that will be used a lot, I think, also in the future. And then it's also great that we have an improved model compared to the traditional change packages. We have this AF upgrader approach, which is highly relevant for those that upgrade more often, and which is also highly relevant for those that only going to upgrade upframe, perhaps not the products, because they don't have standardized product, or it's far off anyway. Jan Leon, you can explain a little bit more about how that works.
Yeah, let me share my screen here. Let me see. Yeah, I'm just going to talk a little bit about upgrading to V4 from an upframe perspective, and also give you an introduction to the new updater. So when upgrading to version 4 of the upgrader, we can use different strategies, but it kind of depends, as Simon said, on the version you're upgrading from, and how many products you are using, and how much customization you have on your solution. So there's no definitive answer on, but we have made some recommendations to both upframe and Pims. So if you are on a release of AppFrame before 2015, there is no upgrade path, so in that case you have to do it manually. But if your solution was last updated between March 2015 and July 2019, you can use the updater in AppFrame version 2, 3 and 4 to get up to the latest version. And so this is only for AppFrame upgrades, so if you don't take any Pims products. And finally, if you're between August 2019 and April 2020, you can use the version 3 and 4 to get up to the latest version. But if you're also including Pims products and your solution is more than 1 year old, we recommend a fresh release, as Simon said, using data transfer scripts. And as this might be a leaner process and might save you some time. And if your solution is less than 1 year old, you can continue with applying change packages up until the latest and continue with the updater after that. And products started using the new updater after the August release, 20.8. But this date could vary from product to product, so you should make sure to check the products you are upgrading. And some notes on upgrading from version 2 to version 3. That might not be a straightforward process if you have an old database. It depends a lot on your current version. And also if all the previous updates have been applied in the past, and there are also some manual steps involved in upgrading from these versions. So we have created a team doc which tries to capture some of the experiences that others have been running into when performing the upgrades from version 2 and 3. And in here we have some documentation on the updaters. So we have version 2, 3, how to migrate from version 3 to 4. And some documentation on version 4. And also we have some people uploading some experiences there, the things they have run into and solutions to different problems that they have experienced during the upgrades. So like Kjetil here has uploaded a team doc and a document describing the upgrade for ConocoPhillips Alaska. And Omega PS US has a good team doc on AppFrame updates, so those are worth to take a look. And also we have Siemens data transfer scripts in here, so you can download these from here and adapt them to your environment and your modules and do the data migration option if you prefer that one instead. And also if you need any assistance in preparing for or performing updates, you can also contact our technology and we will help you get up to the latest version. And then I want to do a quick demonstration of the new RF updater, how you can get started using RF updater, not only for AppFrame updates or Pims products, but you can also use it in your own environment between your dev and your production environment. So let me go into my development environment there. So the first thing I do when starting is going into the DB manager. And from here I can create a new namespace. So I'm going into the namespace settings. And here you have two options. So you can add a local namespace. That means that the code you are developing is originating from this site. Or I can also choose to subscribe to updates by adding an external namespace. So in this case, I'm going to add a local namespace. So, demo. And add it on my development environment. And there are some settings there. You can see that the source URL is blank. That means that I'm the origin for that source. You can also set a prefix for application or system. You can also choose to group namespaces together in groups. So if you have interfaces between different namespaces, the update process might be easier if you group them together and apply them at the same time. There's also some options to suspend deployment if you don't want anything to be pushed. And you can also suspend apply. That means that you won't be able to download and apply any updates. And there's also an important field at the end here, which is the offset. And this is the date from which updates are being generated. And in my case, I want to take all of them since I have a new namespace. If I can get this one to work, let me see. But I can also start with an existing namespace. and set, for instance, the cutoff date from today, and then the updater will start generating updates from today and forward. And after I've added my namespace, I can go in and create my tables and add them like normally. I'm attaching it to the AppEd demo namespace here. And you can see I created some tables and triggers and views. I can also go into the creating a new article. And the important thing here is that we attach it to the same namespace. And this also applies to Win projects, to assemblies, to scripts and templates and styles and Win forms that you have in your Pims database. So they are all deployed in the same manner. So if I add some. And when I'm finalized with my application, I can publish it. And this will make it available for the updater to generate transactions on. So when I've done all my changes, I can go back to the updater. And the updater is kind of split into two tabs. So you have your updates here for downloading and applying updates to the current solution. And I also have a changes tab. This is for generating and deploying code to target solutions. So in my case, I'm going to go in, click generate, select my namespace, which is AppEd demo. And here I can click generate and deploy. Or I can choose to select only generate, and then I can also modify the scripts that I want to distribute before they are actually being deployed. So I'm clicking generate here. See. Some errors maybe. I have to add a filter for deployed. So if I filter now for AppEd demo, you can see that all the code changes I've done is in this transactions table, and they're all sorted by version created. So if you have multiple namespaces that depend on each other, they will, this will ensure that they are all applied in the correct order. And once I've done the deployment, it's now available for the target solution to download and apply the updates. So if I go into my production or staging environment, and in the updates tab, I can go here and click download. Actually, I missed a step. Firstly, I have to go into manage namespaces. And previously I added a local namespace, but since I want to subscribe to updates now, I'm clicking the add external namespace button. And I'm selecting the dev site and the namespace that I just created. And here's the same thing. If I already had some objects in that namespace here on my target environment, I could also change the offset date, and I will only apply updates older than that offset date. And if we now go back to the updater, we can click download, select our namespace. I can see that there are 7 updates in that namespace, and choose to download only for that specific namespace. And once they are downloaded, I can review all the transactions there. So if I see something I don't want, I can also change it before it's being distributed further from my staging environment to my production environment. Or I can also go into the SQL before here and add a skip update statement if I don't want to have this update applied. And finally, when I've reviewed all my changes, I can click apply and select the namespace that I want to apply. This was the wrong one. And clicking apply will apply all those updates into my staging environment. As you can see here, they have just been applied into the DB manager here. And finally, I just want to show you kind of release process we have in Upframe in Pims today. So we do our development here, and we do generate and apply, and they are then deployed into Pims dev when they check for updates. And further, they are being deployed into Pims release along with all the Pims product updates before being made available to any customer test locations where they can download, test, modify, and deploy to production. That's it for the updater.
Okay,
good.
Very good. I think, at least for me, myself, I'm thinking here there are two main ways of upgrading a Pims solution, and exactly when to use which approach. It's not a kind of a fixed answer. You have to figure it out. And one rule of thumb, Jan Leon mentioned a year or perhaps half a year old databases might be best to take with the approach Simon explained, with pushing all the data into a new Pims database. But there are other things impacting which decision to take. So talk with experienced. Yep.
Yeah, we have two solutions. You have now seen the experts.
Yes.
To call and ask for help. Let's think that that's the most important part for this session.
I think so.
Yeah, good.
Okay, and this was it for today. We have 3 more sessions for tomorrow.
Tomorrow, yeah.
Or 4 actually.
4, yeah. And Jan Leon will start off tomorrow morning with Windows. Early morning.
Yes.
Next the Windows platform from AppFrame.
Yes.
And then the Flutter team is next, and then you with the case study of Total.
Yeah, with my colleagues, several colleagues, yes.
And then the last one, what's the idea between R4 and 365?
Yes.
Continuing on
the chat with Roger there, yes.
Yeah. Good.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Simon and Jan Leon.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.